Florida man has been arrested after sending very specific threats of violence toward Democratic members of Congress. Now, this is not Cesar Sayoc. This is another Florida man. Federal authorities today announced that John Kless, a 49-year-old resident of Tamarack in Broward County, called 3 Democrats at their Washington, D.C. offices on April 16th and left voicemail messages threatening murder. So again, these are specific threats, which is why the authorities needed to get involved. And I'm gonna read you some of the statements in just a second. I have to censor them, and it's gonna be awkward to read the statements, but I want you to understand the severity of these threats. He left voicemails. Now, the lawmakers included California Congressman Eric Swalwell, Detroit Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. He called Rashida Tlaib's office and left a voicemail, but he not only attacked her, he also attacked Representative Ilhan Omar. So in all 3 messages, Kless referenced his hatred for Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, repeatedly calling her a, quote, towel head and a member of the Taliban. I'm gonna give you an example of one of the voicemail messages. He said, this is when he called Rashida Tlaib's office and left a message. It was your Taliban B, the one who opened her effing towelhead mouth about how some people did it. You know what? She's lucky she's getting death threats. So are you, all right? You're lucky they're just threats, because the day when the bell tolls, and then he calls her a whore, and this country comes to a war, there will be no more threats. Your life will be on the effing line. And so that's actually, believe it or not, one of the more tame voice messages. There was a number of other statements or voicemails that he had left. And I was like, well, if I read this on air, I'm not gonna be able to read anything. So this is the only one. And before I open it up to the panel, I just want to remind you of the type of fear mongering and the type of incitement that we've been seeing over and over again from the right wing. Take a look.
Really? There's so few people that did something? You have to wonder if she's an American first. And can you imagine if she was representing your community?
Does he worry at all about inciting violence against Muslims in general or Ilhan Omar in specific?
Certainly nothing could be further from the truth. The president's not trying to incite violence against anybody. He's actually speaking out against it.
Any second thoughts about that tweet and the way it was produced and put together?
No, not at all. Look, she's been very disrespectful to this country. She's got a way about her that's very, very bad, I think, for our country.
And remember, when there was initially a man who got arrested for sending specific threats to staffers at Ilhan Omar's office, it didn't convince Trump to stop fear mongering about her. He continued doing it, and she's still getting the threats. And look, there are real consequences to it, because you can't assume that all the people listening to that message are rational actors that won't carry out acts of violence. We're living in a crazy time right now where people are putting action behind their words.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just essentially exposing her to violence without question. And all of the other minority members, well, I should say members who are part of the minority community, they're marginalized, and so they're often targeted by people, and they're really just ramping it up, the Republican Party and Trump. It's great.
It
is sad. I mean, we've said this so many times in so many ways. I mean, as a leader of a country with multiple types of people under that leadership, whether they voted for you or not, the fact is you can actually create a better environment, or you can instill a worse environment. And we know the line that he has gone to. And even when he's talking now, that she has a way about her. What does that even mean? What is that supposed to mean? No, she is a sitting congressperson in Washington making legislation, who was voted into that position by people, and who will make legislation that will benefit people in her district, whether or not they voted for her. So you offer that position the respect that it deserves. I'm glad that he was arrested in this case, because the fact is, whether these are actions or just threats, they do represent things that should be addressed by the authorities, because the reality is you don't know in this environment and with just accessibility to firearms and everything else, what becomes an action from a threat. So good on the authorities, at least in Florida, there in that.
So I know that this is like a random question to ask, but I'm curious what you ladies think, because every once in a while when Jenks here, we'll get into a little mini debate about who was worse, George Bush or Donald Trump. And I'm on the side of Donald Trump mostly because, look, I understand the arguments regarding our engagement in certain wars during Bush's tenure, but I mean, Trump is also engaging in conflicts that we shouldn't be engaging in, particularly in Yemen right now. He vetoed that bipartisan resolution and decided, no, we're gonna stay in Yemen, we're gonna help them logistically, and that of course is gonna use up taxpayer money, but there's the moral component of that, which is all these children who are dying from famine because of our involvement. There's that side. But more importantly, domestically, there's absolutely no respect for one another. There's there's no empathy, no compassion, and more than anything, we don't see one another as humans anymore. And I think that climate is so incredibly dangerous.
I agree that the issue with Bush and with America in general, all of the wars that we create, all of the wars in which we engage, all of the wars that create death and generations of death is awful. With respect to Trump, what he is creating is the future and the present of what that can get to. Reinstilling or reinvoking that kind of hatred towards the other, making not just America but the world more and more of a place by virtue of his pulpit, by virtue of the tweets, by virtue of how he incites, very specifically to create much more of a distinction between some people and other people, and that's 1930s stuff. I mean, that stuff is so very dangerous, not just for today and our continued policies, but for tomorrow and beyond.
Right,
No,
it sets a
absolutely.
tone.
Yep.
It sets a tone.
And Obama, I think he really worked on the we and bringing people together and uniting people, and also showing others that that person who doesn't look like you, but they also have these qualities just like you, and really bringing kind of that level and rhetoric down. And now it's completely and totally trumped up, and it's an us versus them. And you're absolutely right, Anna, in terms of people don't even see each other as human beings.
Right, and for anyone who might think, oh, come on, don't blame Trump for this, that's a stretch. He did mention Trump in 2 of the 3 voicemail messages. In 2 of the 3 messages, Kless defended Trump and told lawmakers to stop criticizing him. So for all those freedom of speech warriors out there, you now have a situation in which Americans and members of Congress aren't allowed to criticize the president, which is, I mean, that's the whole purpose and reason that we have that amendment, right?
That's right.
For us to challenge people in positions of power, to not worry about retaliation, not worry about the government retaliating against us for speaking our truth.
Yeah.
And in this case, Trump has created a situation in which people are intimidated and are living in fear because if they speak out, they're gonna get targeted like this, and it's unacceptable.
That's the reason the founding fathers, left down across the pond.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
come on, they didn't want this kind of monarchy, crazy rule.
Right.
And this is what we have now.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.